So good evening, welcome to Paradise Valley Community College. This is the first PVCC public lecture of the year. I'm kicking it off. I teach philosophy here, and I also am the advisor for the Philosophical Society. And I just wanted to give you a couple updates about what we're doing here on campus. This is the second year of our public philosophy lecture series. The first year, we had 8 lectures, and we asked the people who gave the lectures to write up their talk and submit it, and we started the Public Philosophy Journal. So here's the journal. I just got my paper copy today. You can touch it after the talk if you want to. I'm very proud of this journal. It's a lot of work by a lot of people working together, and so you can, this is a website we made to, I call it the Public Philosophy Hub. It's public-philosophy.com. It's where we put all of the announcements for events that are happening in the Phoenix area. So the other thing I want to let you know about that we're doing on campus, Professor Michael Noshka and I are sort of hosting a discussion on every 4th Friday of the month for this semester. This is called Friday Philosophy. And the next meeting is September 27th, which is next Friday. And we'll be talking about Heraclitus Fragments. So Heraclitus is an ancient philosopher who, he wrote things, but we don't have much that he left behind. We have some fragments of his writings and some things that other people have said about him, but it's fascinating stuff. So they're short readings, and we'll be discussing them together. If you're a PVCC student and you want to join us, if you go to this website, there's a Canvas page. You can see it listed on the bottom of this flyer. And on that page, the readings are posted, so you don't have to purchase them or anything. You can just get them in your phone or download them and print them. So you're invited to come to that. You can see the dates are here. It's always fun, and we've had some help with promoting it, so it's going to be exciting next time. Then I also want to tell you about the next lecture in our series. This is Professor Michael Noshka. His title is Whitewashed Tombs, Jesus' Blackness, White Evangelicals, and the Problem of Nationalism. This sounds fascinating and exciting, if not controversial. So you should come to that. It is Thursday, November 21st. So we have a couple months, and it'll be good. So I want to pack this room out for that lecture. So please come and support philosophy at PVCC. And with that, I think I'm going to go into my talk. And my talk I pre-wrote, so I'm going to read it to you, which is kind of what you do with a formal lecture. You read it, but I practiced and it sounded a little bit dry, so I'll probably add some things to it that livens it up. But I also thought, you know what I didn't include? Why should I be talking about this subject? Why am I the person to address public philosophy? And so I figured out the reason I'm in this position is because I went to Arizona State University. I studied academic philosophy. I studied analytic philosophy, which is very specialized. And I teach at the community college with young people every day, every year for 17 years. So I'm sort of the bridge between the academy and new people to philosophy. So I think that is why I'm in this position where I can bring philosophy to the public. It's kind of like bringing philosophy to the educated person who's interested in ideas, but not necessarily trained in the field, okay? So what I would like you to do is write down questions you may have, because I'm going to talk for a while, and then I want to talk together after that. So I'll talk for about 30 minutes. And I'll try to be interesting and funny. But if it's not funny and interesting, you can tell me afterwards. I will turn the recording off for that part, so you don't have to be shy and, oh no, this is going to be recorded. And I want you to ask good questions. So be thoughtful, write your questions down, and we'll have a good discussion. That's part of public philosophy too, is it's a give and take, an exchange of reasoning. So it shouldn't just be one person talking and taking up all the time, right? All right, so I'm going to read it to you. My talk is what is public philosophy and why do we need it? Okay, why do we need it? See if I answered that question. Have I answered this question, what is public philosophy? And have I given you the reasons why we need it? Okay. Okay. Increasing political division, the awareness of a crisis in higher education, and the general breakdown of public discourse have caused a growing interest in public philosophy. Some fear that the very foundation of Western civilization is crumbling. I don't know if you hear this, but I hear this often. People are nervous. Since Western civilization is founded upon Western philosophy, there's a growing suspicion that academic philosophy has been failing in its duty to provide a coherent foundation for the common good. Are the philosophers falling down on their job? The dominant philosophy in the West today is rarefied, skeptical, and confined to specialists in the field within the halls of the academy. Many people are saying that public philosophy is necessary for the survival of the discipline of philosophy, but it is also essential for the survival of civilization. But what exactly is public philosophy? What is its nature, and why is it necessary? Public philosophy addresses those in the public realm who are capable of and desire to argue for the foundational truth for the public good. So we have a common life together. What is the good for our common life together? Somebody wanted me to talk about the good tonight, right? Public philosophy is addressed both to an audience of the public and for the good of the public. So it's to the people, for the people. What counts as the public sphere changes with each era. In our age, it may take the form of public lectures like this one, public societies like the one we started, podcasts, blog posts, journal articles, interaction on social media platforms, conversations in coffee houses, YouTube videos, and probably a lot more that I can't think of right now, but you might know. Public philosophy is only limited by our imagination. Any shared space can become an opportunity to do public philosophy, like perhaps in the Learning Support Center or in the KSC building while you're eating lunch, right? I know students are doing philosophy on this campus. All right, but what is philosophy? How many of you are in a Philosophy 101 class or have had 101 class? All right, so this is going to sound familiar. This should tie it together for you. What is philosophy? Philosophy may be defined by its several features. I bet you know what they are. See if I get all of them. Philosophy in its most basic form is an area of study that deals with foundational questions. These foundational questions include, how do I know? What is real? And what is the good life? You know these ones? What ought I to do, right? If we don't answer these foundational questions, we cannot hope to find answers to less foundational questions, such as questions of applied ethics and politics, which seems to be what people are arguing about a lot, right? Philosophy is a way of life that is concerned with the love of wisdom. Wisdom is necessary to live a good life for oneself, but it is also necessary for the common good and knowing how best to structure and order the institutions of culture. We don't usually think on that level, institutions. This school is part of the institution of education, right? So what is the good for education? Currently, our world could use more wisdom. So says me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's wise out there. Wisdom involves knowing the good and the most appropriate means of achieving the good in any and every context of life. Wisdom is cumulative, not arising from a single individual or generation. It is transgenerational and transcultural. It's not confined to any particular culture or time. We in this room should have the cumulative wisdom of the ages passed on to us through our education. So let me ask you, do you have the accumulated wisdom of humanity? Have you gotten it through your education? Is that too controversial to ask? But somehow the cumulative wisdom of the ages has been lost. Can we retrieve the wisdom of the ages? That's what I want to do. And if so, must we engage in philosophy, the love of wisdom, to do so. So you see the necessity of philosophy in that. If we love wisdom and we want the wisdom of the ages, then we have to do philosophy, because philosophy is the love of wisdom, right? Philosophy is most identifiable by its methodology, the critical use of reason. So we talk about this in class. Philosophy is a method, the critical use of reason, right? You memorize it and you put it on a card, but do you really understand what it means? The critical use of reason necessitates understanding what reason is. And this is something that hasn't been really defined and hashed out in the discipline. We use the word reason all the time, but what do we mean when we say reason? When I'm using the word reason, it is essentially the laws of thought. And the laws of thought include the law of identity, A is A, the law of non-contradiction, not both A and non-A in the same respect and at the same time, and the law of excluded middle, which is either A or non-A, right? You put those on a note card and you memorize those. So this discussion isn't too foreign to you right now. The laws of thought are not fallible because they're laws, but our use of the laws is quite fallible, right? And that's why we need to be trained in critical thinking, so we can be better at using those laws. Our first use of reason, when we're using it, not reason itself, but our use of reason, like reasoning, what do we do when we're reasoning, is to form concepts, judgments, and arguments. And these are the forms of all thought. Concepts grasp the essential nature of a thing and name that thing with a word or a term or a symbol. Concepts are more or less meaningful depending on our grasp of them. For example, the word God expresses a concept. Many disagree on the meaning of this word, right? So we can take time and define words and clarify their meaning until we understand the idea that the word communicates. Socrates spent much time pursuing the definitions of words in a desire to understand the reality that words represent. And if you read the Apology in my class, you know what I'm talking about. Justice, what is justice? He wants a definition, right? So this is a lot of the work of philosophy, defining terms. Judgments are when we put two concepts together with is or is not in affirmation or negation. For example, God is good is a judgment. Judgments are either true or false. And this is probably where people don't like that. Wait, what? That statement is either true or false? Yes. Judgments such as God is good may be supported by an argument. And an argument isn't just people going back and forth. It has a definite form in philosophy. Arguments are proofs and are either sound or unsound. So we can analyze them. Arguments are, knowledge is gained by means of argument. We can see that there's an order to our thinking, from meaning to truth to knowledge, more basic to less basic. In addition to using reason to form concepts, judgments, and arguments, we use reason as a test for meaning. This is the critical use of reason. We use reason to interpret all of our experiences in light of our basic beliefs. And so our basic beliefs have to do with what we think about knowledge. How do we know stuff? What we think about ultimate reality, what is real, what we think about the good life. So those are our basic beliefs. Now we have to use reason to test them and see, what do I have an argument for what I believe? We all use reason because it is an aspect of our nature as human beings. We're all rational beings. Reason in us is natural. We're born with it. It's not cultural, it's not conventional, and it's universal among all thinking beings. But words are conventional and cultural and contextual. So we have to take time to define them, to see what idea, what concept is being expressed here. Reason is a part of our nature and it is an aspect of reality. In philosophy, we say that reason is ontological. It applies to being so that our minds are grasping what's there in the world. All of being, not just empirical being, perhaps invisible being. I know that's a hard one, right? How do I grasp invisible being with my mind? Well, first, do you have a mind? Or do you just have a brain? Being is what exists. what is. Reason grasps being. Reason also puts restrictions on being. Reason tells us that there are no square circles and no uncaused events and no being from non-being. Reason is our common source of authority because we are all rational beings. We all have recourse to reason and we can hold each other accountable. Hey, you just contradicted yourself. You just said A is non-A. And we can say, oh yeah, I did, huh? I should correct that. If it was only that nice, right? Anytime words are being used in any form of authority, be it religious, political, parental, or otherwise, reason is being used and what is said can be tested for meaning. So we have a kind of higher authority. Reason is a higher authority that we can access. It's also authoritative for public philosophy, bringing it back to us. So in this room, you can ask me, Professor Burton, you said this, what does that mean? And if I contradict myself, you should say, no, I don't think so. That's a contradiction, right? And I'll have to give you $1. Say, thank you for helping me. Reason is fundamental to human personality. That means we have thoughts, emotions, and will, and these are ordered that way. Thoughts give rise to emotions, and thoughts and emotions give rise to will or action. So there's an order in us, and reason is to rule over our emotions and our will, and that's sometimes hard, right? You have to train yourself. Reason, when used well, is the source of our greatest good. So there's your hint about the good. If you use reason well, perhaps you'll reach the good and it'll be good for you. But when we don't use reason, it's the source of our deepest misery. And this should be a sort of check for us. Am I miserable? Is it because I don't have the good? And do I not have the good because I'm not using reason? So reason is the instrument for obtaining meaning. And it seems like all humans need meaning. Misery is the lack of meaning. Am I right? You can test it. You don't believe it just because I said it. All right, so that was a bit about using reason. What else do we do with it? Reason provides the tools for doing philosophy. The method of philosophy includes understanding what things mean. We just said that meaning is more basic than truth. If we don't understand what something means, we can't know whether it's true or not. Once we have grasped meaning, then we can pursue truth. And this is the thing our society doesn't want to do anymore. Truth, there's only your truth and my truth, but not like the truth, or what some people call the absolute truth. I don't really know what that is, but I heard it recently. If you tell me I can't have the truth, then you're telling me you can't do philosophy, because that's what philosophy is about. They want to know the truth of the matter. And it seems like our society is spiraling downward right now without the truth. I don't know if you were in my 101 class this afternoon, but you told me some scary things that I didn't want to know. And now that I know them, I see how people are not pursuing the truth. It was about Instagram or something. Oh no, it was dating apps. I don't want to know that stuff. We can talk about it after. Yeah. All right. Once we've grasped meaning, we can pursue the truth. Philosophy is concerned with the truth of the matter. Contemporary philosophy doubts that knowledge of the truth is possible. The whole discipline, it seems, doubts that truth is possible. This is called skepticism. Skepticism says we really can't know for sure. We can't have certainty. There aren't any things that are clear to reason. Now, there's also a religious version of this called fideism. They would acknowledge we can't be certain, but we know that leads to a kind of meaninglessness, so we just got to believe anyway. So both skepticism and fideism agree we can't really know, and they kind of feed off of each other then. The skeptic despises the fideist because they make claims, but they can't back it up. And then the fideist doesn't want to go the way of skepticism because it leads to meaninglessness, and they seem to be fighting each other. Someone needs to say, whoa, break it up. We should go back to looking for the truth or re-examining our assumptions that we really can't know. Have you tried? I've been asking my students this. They say, no, we can't know. They tell me we can't know. I said, have you tried to know? And what method did you use? Did you use reason, or did you use science or empiricism or your intuition or your tradition or common sense? Because those don't deliver knowledge. But reason perhaps does. I'm saying perhaps because maybe I don't want to make a huge promise while I'm on video. Okay, so both skepticism and fideism deny the possibility of knowledge, and consequently, they deny the possibility of doing philosophy. In one of my classes today, we came up with a little phrase, skepticism, ruining philosophy for everyone. Right? I think it is. I wrote a book on it. You can read my book. So what does philosophy require of us? It requires self-examination. It requires that we look at ourselves, know thyself. So it's easy to be outward-looking, critiquing other people's views, but philosophy requires that we look inwardly at our own views first. This is consistent with Socrates' claim that the unexamined life is not worth living, and with the motto, know thyself. Self-examination is a necessary component to knowing what is true. If we want to know what is true, we have to seek after it. You have to be in love with the truth. You have to pursue it. Like Socrates thought you should be in love with it as if it's your significant other. And if it's your significant other, you pursue them and you woo them. And so that's how you should be with truth. Doesn't that make sense though? Do you love the truth? And when you know what is true, then you should be able to show what is true. You want to show off your love to everybody else. Look at this. It's the truth. I love it. You should too. Knowing involves showing. This is called propositional knowledge. It's not the same as subjective experiential knowledge or knowledge by acquaintance. It's not the same as I know what coffee tastes like, or I know how to ride a bicycle. It's I know what the good is. It's about philosophical claims, not experiential claims. So knowledge, in that sense, propositional knowledge, is objective, and it's fundamental to public philosophy, because if there is knowledge, we should be able to share it together. We should be able to say, look at this piece of knowledge, and because we all have reason, we should be able to say, yeah, that is a piece of knowledge. Yeah, I do know that. I should save it. I should put it in my long-term memory, put it on a note card and put it in my memory. All right, knowledge is not the same as holding an opinion or a belief. Opinions and beliefs can be merely subjective. It could be just false. Some of you were telling me about claims on social media that people just believe because a cool kid said it. I don't know, it sounds dangerous. So opinions and beliefs can be merely subjective, and they're often mistaken. But knowledge is objective and can be defended publicly by means of reason and argument. We should be looking for that. Objective knowledge is shared. What is subjective, relative, and personal is not relevant for public philosophy. This is because it is not shared by all. And because it is not shared by all, it is not persuasive. Appeal to emotion or the will to power is not appropriate for public philosophy either, because they bypass our common authority. They treat you as not a rational being. Emotionalism and the will to power are often resorted to when we fail to have reasons for our belief. So when we fail to do philosophy, then we do the informal fallacies, the emotional appeals, or do it because I said so, appeal to fear. Do it because I'm in power and you're under me. Do it because the mob will get you. Will get you on Twitter or something, right? On the other hand, we may reason well and provide sound arguments in public discourse and still fail to persuade our listeners. Does that mean we failed? No, it means something's going on in the listener. Failure to persuade may be because our conversation partners are not committed to knowing and pursuing what is true. Public philosophy, in order to be successful, will require a commitment to the pursuit of what is true on behalf of the people that are engaged in it. What is true is what is according to reality, and not merely to how I feel or what I want, because these are changeable. My feelings can change in a moment, right? Truth as reflecting reality is not changeable. Reality might change, like things might change, but the truth about the thing is it is what it is. Truth is not merely piecemeal, though. We don't just have like a truth here and a truth here and a truth here. It's systematic. Philosophy helps us to build a coherent world and life view, or a system of philosophy. If you take my class, this is the house, your philosophy of life. Our philosophy of life begins with our epistemology, then our metaphysics, and then ethics, and then all that comes with that. All of our choices, all of our values, all of our attitudes. Everything we do is rooted in our philosophy of life. So it's necessary to do philosophy well, right? Philosophy helps us to see whether our philosophy of life is coherent and consistent. Do all the parts fit together? Do I contradict myself in what I believe? Am I consistently living it? Do I have integrity? All people have a world and life view or a philosophy of life. Not all people have tested their world and life view for meaning. And so some philosophies of life do not provide the meaning we so desperately need. An existential sense of meaninglessness is a sign that one should check one's philosophy of life for coherence at the basic level. And maybe a way to do this is to talk to your friends. Hey friends, I was thinking this and it doesn't make any sense to me. What do you think? And you can do it together. That's public philosophy, right? When you do it with your friends to help, hear what others are thinking. It's really, could be dangerous to do philosophy alone. I've read some novels about that. Tolstoy, what's the one with Raskolnikov? Crime and Punishment. That's a story about a guy who did philosophy alone. He's like, yeah, that makes sense in my head. I'm going to go put it into practice. And the results were not good. So we need our friends to help us, right? Or teachers, mentors, older people who've gone through it. All right. The history of ideas is the history of the conflict between different philosophical systems. Not all philosophical systems are equally coherent, and some have become obsolete. When a philosophy ceases to bring meaning, people will cease to defend that philosophy. And this is true of Western philosophy as well. Who would want to defend Western philosophy if it is perceived to be meaningless? In fact, if it's meaningless, we should abandon it. Some of us, like myself, are not ready to go there yet. I don't think Western philosophy is meaningless. Maybe it hasn't gone far enough. Maybe there are some contradictions that need to be worked out, but that's the fun stuff. So I invite you to join me. Let's figure out what's worth keeping and what's needing to be, done away with because it is meaningless. Human beings are meaning seekers. And you can challenge this. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, no, meaning I can do without that. But then I would wonder, why are you here tonight? Oh, for the extra credit. We need meaning more than anything else. And we gain meaning through our view of the good life, which is part of our world and life view. The good for human beings is based on human nature. Human nature is fundamentally rational. Says me, you can challenge it. The good then for humans is the use of reason to the fullest. Reason used to the fullest gives us understanding of the nature of reality. We want to know what's there. What is it? What is ultimate reality like? As we understand and pursue a fuller understanding, we find meaning, we grow and mature, and find satisfaction and fullness of life. This is what we most desire, and we cannot get it without doing philosophy well. So you see the necessity for doing philosophy. We are rational political animals. That we are political means that we live in community with other human beings. We can't avoid this. And we're born ignorant, and we need to be taught about the good life. This means that we're necessarily dependent on the human community and the institutions of culture to know what is good and to know the means to the good. This means that we can't do philosophy independently, like I just said. I mean, you can try it, but it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to rely, you're relying on the community of the 2,500-year history of philosophy, if you're really engaging with ideas, so you're not doing it alone, you're doing it with Socrates and Aristotle and Descartes and maybe Kant and maybe even Hegel. Ooh. Must we? All right. So if we're not doing it alone, and we're doing it within the institutions like the educational institution, then philosophy is necessarily a public work. Community, shared, public. It requires the human community, and the human community needs to know what the common good is. So we need people to do philosophy, and philosophy need people. So it's necessarily public. Human society is a society of rational beings. Participation in human society depends on our exercise of that rationality. We can do it well, or we can do it poorly. And if we do it poorly, we will be excluded more and more from the human community. Just think about friends you have when they act irrationally. Do you want to hang out with them, or do you exclude them? Or do you separate yourself from them? One of my professors talked about children, companions, and criminals. Children, they're not fully developed, so you don't have this kind of conversation with them. Companions, when they are acting irrationally, maybe you unfriend them, or you don't answer their calls, or you don't text back. And criminals are physically separated from society. They go to jail, right? Or prison. So think about that. They're acting irrationally, so they're not being included. So we have to use reason well to do the community well, because that's what it's based on. Human beings as rational beings have a need for philosophy, and human beings as political beings have an obligation to do philosophy. Philosophy done together in the polis, or the city, or the nation, or whatever you want to call it, in the group, is public philosophy. It's for the polis, and it's by the polis. It is the corporate, cumulative, communal, and cooperative pursuit of what is good for the individual, for the community, and for the future. And I know some of you want to change the world and make it a better place. So philosophy can tell us why we should do that. Why ought we to do that? All right, but what is public philosophy more specifically? I've been talking about philosophy, trying to tell you it's necessary, but what is public philosophy? Public philosophy includes offense and defense, like football, right? Philosophy on the offense seeks the truth and seeks to know what is good and what is beautiful. And we do some constructive things. It seeks to know the moral law and applications of the moral law to all of life. Philosophy on the defense seeks to critique what is harmful to the true and the good and the beautiful. It seeks to root out moral evil and its effects on the individual and the community. Defensive philosophy is critical philosophy. It is the critical use of reason to test for meaning, to discard what is meaningless and defend what is meaningful against all objections. And the offense and defense we use are arguments. I mean, I never use my fists, ever. I always use arguments, right? I don't even put pads on for anything. I probably should, though. Public philosophy is not merely activist philosophy. I watched a video of a guy, I think it's in the Public Philosophy Society. He's at New York University, and he was talking about public philosophy, and he was saying that a lot of people want it to be activist, like social justice stuff. And he was saying, we can't let that happen to philosophy, because we need to think. It's not only action, it's thought first, then action. And I agree with him. It's not merely activist philosophy. Activist philosophy seeks to rectify social injustices. It's very popular right now, but social justice requires that we understand the good for society and what justice is, right? Do we even know what we're talking about when we say justice? These are more fundamental questions. Therefore, activist philosophy depends upon foundational philosophy. Foundational philosophy is an offensive philosophy. We must know what is true in order to know what is just. If we don't have the truth, then we can't have justice. It's just the strong person telling the weaker person what to do, or the strong group telling the less strong group what to do. Contemporary activist philosophy comes loaded with philosophical assumptions. Defensive philosophy must test those assumptions critically to see whether those assumptions are meaningful, matching reality, and are therefore true. Activist philosophy, without defending its presuppositions, may turn out to be harmful to society. It is criticism without offering a defensible constructive philosophy. And we see this in some of the postmodern critiques. Not all, but some of it is just critique. And we're getting to a point where we could critique ourselves out of existence. This is nihilistic self-destruction. Activist philosophy without foundational philosophy becomes dangerously critical to the foundations of the community. Public philosophy must be bold and daring, willing to go where many have not desired to go in the recent past. We must ask and answer questions about metaphysics, or what is real. For the past century, we have given up on metaphysics because we're skeptics and we think we really can't know that stuff, because our epistemology is off. We've assumed all of our knowledge is through the senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Well, we can't know metaphysics that way, so we don't do metaphysics. That's just being dishonest, because we all do metaphysics. We just aren't saying it. We're just not doing it together in public. We're hiding our metaphysics. So we must ask questions about what is real. Once the answer to the question in metaphysics is done in a positive way that gives us knowledge, we can go on to answer questions about what is good and what is virtuous and what will make us ultimately happy. Oftentimes, answering these questions may feel like religion. Religion, based on scripture, is not shared by all people. And because it's not shared, this kind of religion can't be the basis for public life. But there is something called natural religion. And I just put a video up in here. If you go to this website and go to the videos, I just put a video up of my good friend, Owen Anderson, who also is a PVCC alum. He just gave a talk at Grand Canyon University on why do we need religious liberty. And he talks about how the founding fathers founded the nation on natural religion. So that's a really good talk to go with what I'm about to say. Religion based on scripture is not shared by all, and it can't be the source of a common life together if we don't all agree. But there is this thing called natural religion, and natural religion is what can be known by all people everywhere at all times about God, and is thus fit for public discourse. It's philosophy, not religion. Public philosophy must address the question, is there a God or is there not a God? We've been bypassing this one for a really long time. If we can't address this question and defend our answer, there's no point in moving ahead with the answers to other questions together. If the answer to this question is not clear, then questions about ethics and the good life will also not be clear. We must address these foundational questions as the basis of a public philosophy. And you can argue with me afterwards if you want to about that. Addressing these foundational questions is going to press us back up and to have to work on our reasoning abilities. Public philosophy as shared discourse is the shared give and take of reasons. We must understand what reason is, like we talked about earlier, and how to use reason well. Therefore, addressing these foundational questions may force us to go back and master basic reasoning skills. We may have to do something like public logic together. I don't know. Should we make everyone take a logic class? Maybe just take it online. Public philosophy will require us to begin with the question of how do we know things? That's the first question. How do we know? And if we're starting with different methodology, we won't arrive at the same conclusion. So we need to see, can we all get on board with reason? Let's start there. Can we all get on board with A is A? You think, this is crazy. Okay, so we need common ground. We need to get on board together. So I'm going to talk about common ground for public philosophy. Before we can start reasoning with one another in the public sphere, we will have to establish common ground for reasoning with one another. This common ground will require us to take time to understand reason and to commit to the laws of thought when reasoning with one another. And you're like, wait a minute, we have to stop and like talk to people about reason and all that. No, we can just do it together like this. Maybe you can like share the video with your friends and say, what did you think of that video? I don't know. You don't have to do this every single time you talk to somebody. Hey, wait, do we agree on the laws of thought? Just check that first. It'll come up naturally in discussions when you learn how to do it. This common ground will require us to take time to understand reason and to commit to the laws of thought when reasoning with one another. Don't contradict yourself, and I won't contradict myself. Okay, right? That's easy enough. Not really. Sometimes it's not. Common ground will require of us that when we commit to a position, when we build our house, and we say, this is what I believe, we're willing to live with the implications of that position. That's hard too. This is called integrity. Integrity is consistency between what we say and what we do. If we commit to a position, we should be willing to live with that position and all of its consequences. Furthermore, if we find incoherence in our position, we should be willing to change our position. And that's hard too, right? Oh man, I have to change my mind. It's hard. We should be willing to give up a false assumption rather than giving up reason. If we do give up reason, let's say I'm going to give up reason, not my false assumption, we should also give up dialogue. Dialogue assumes reason, and we cannot both assume reason and give up reason at the same time and be taken seriously. So if you're saying, I'm not committed to the laws of thought, that means what I'm saying right now is meaningless. So you should listen to me. Who does that, right? But I guess it does happen. It's just a lack of integrity. You say one thing and do another. Common ground will require that we address more basic questions prior to addressing less basic questions. We are talking about logically more basic questions. If we find answers to more basic questions together, we can find answers to less basic questions together. This is hopeful for making progress in finding meaning and in settling disputes among human beings. There are many disputes, I'm sure you're aware of it, among humans, and this could be quite daunting. It could be scary, right? Just watch the news and see people arguing, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. But our hope is that there's a method for addressing these disputes. This method is called presuppositional thinking, which assumes that we should address logically more basic questions before addressing less basic questions. And if we can find agreement down here, perhaps we can find agreement up here. So here's an example. Meaning is logically more basic than truth. We must understand what a statement means before we can say whether that statement is true or not. And I do this in class all the time, right? Today we said, skepticism leads to intellectual despair. And I said, what does that mean? What's despair? And we had to take a minute, define our terms. And then skepticism leads to hopelessness with respect to knowledge. What does that mean, right? So we take time to understand where we're coming from, to come at a unified understanding of the statement. And then we can talk about whether it's true or not, right? Another example is that premises in an argument are logically prior to the conclusion of an argument. Premise first, conclusion second. If we can agree on the more basic, we can agree on the less basic, and this is hopeful. And I've done it for 17 years in the classroom. I've seen it happen. We've had great conversations, and if you've been in my classes, I think you could agree with me. Lastly, common ground will require that we are committed to the principle of clarity. The principle of clarity states that some things are clear. Clear means they're easily knowable if we're seeking to know. Easily knowable is that all humans can know it who want to know it, and if it's clear, they ought to know it. We're morally accountable for things that are clear. So there's a moral obligation to knowing what is clear as a human being. Well, what will happen if I don't? Then you'll be in murkiness. And not only that, you'll act out of your murkiness and affect the community. Now, maybe you're wondering, what is clear to reason? I've never heard of this before. Basic philosophical assumptions about God and man, or ultimate reality and human nature, and good and evil, or what's harmful to humans and what is helpful for humans, is clear to reason. For instance, it's clear that either God exists or God doesn't exist. This is like excluded middle. Either there is a God or there isn't one. It's clear what the good is and what the good is not. And we do this in class. Can money be the good? No, money is a means. It's not an end in itself. It's clear that we know by reason or we don't know by reason. So we have these either ors. And it's not like black or white. It's A and non-A. Reason or non-reason. Now, if we can't agree to common ground, and we can't agree to all these things I just laid out for you, then we can't engage in public discourse that is fruitful. It will turn bad. And if it has turned badly when you're talking to people, you should back up and analyze what happened there. Why didn't that discussion turn out icky? I'll use that word. Have you been in an icky discussion? Yeah. We don't want to do it again, right? They called me a jerk in the end. Well, probably we weren't thinking presuppositionally, or maybe we used informal fallacies where we thought we were using a real argument, we were using a fake argument. So you can go back. Maybe you need to go back to your friends and say, friends, I got into this discussion with a person and it went badly. What do you think happened? And maybe they can help you. But you have to have friends. This is assuming you have friends, right? All right, the main obstacles to common ground are skepticism. We can't really have certainty, and fideism. We can't have certainty, we just have to believe it anyway. Both of them deny that some things are clear to reason. Therefore, these people who hold to skepticism and fideism won't readily engage in public philosophy, and they may even seek to hinder it. The question is, are these skeptics and fideists willing to have integrity and live with the implications of their position? If nobody can really know, then why engage in public discourse? If we aren't dialoguing to find knowledge, then what are we doing when we talk to each other? If knowledge is not possible, we should just be silent and go home and live and let live. But my experience is that skeptics and fideists don't do that. They come after you. All right, so we want to do this thing, public philosophy, and it sounds kind of hard and daunting. We need some virtues to help us. So what are the virtues of public philosophy? What do we need to gird ourselves with if we're going to do it? Public philosophy as pursuit of the common good will require certain virtues. Knowing the good involves doing the good. And knowing the common good requires doing the common good. Doing involves virtue, if you want to do it well. If we know the goal, we will know the most appropriate virtues for achieving that goal. So remember, the goal is the end, virtues are the means to achieving it. So public philosophy involves public discourse. Public discourse will require that we have wisdom in how we communicate with our fellow human beings, right? This does kind of take wisdom when you want to talk to other people and pursue knowledge with them. So this is going to require we have interpersonal skills. Take some communications classes, right? Public philosophy will require that we love the good and we love our fellow human beings. So think about that. Do you love your fellow human beings? Do you want the good for them too? Another virtue necessary for doing public philosophy is hope. Hope that the good can be achieved and that we will achieve it at some point in human history. But what about my life? You can have the good in your life and hope that other humans will get it too. This is going to require a rugged, dogged, gradual idealism. In my classes today, we talked about romantic idealism. We want the goal, we want the good, we want it now. And then you find out we can't have it right now because it's going to take a lot of work, and then you get all sad. You can't have the good. No, you can have the good. It's just going to take hard work and a lot of time. Those who do public philosophy will have to be patient, persevering, and gritty. Do you know what it is to be gritty? Do they talk about grit? Do you have it? It's going to take grit. There will be much opposition. So those engaging in public philosophy will need courage. They will need to be willing and able to say hard things in the face of public opposition. And you have to say hard things nicely. That's hard too, right? Progress in knowing and pursuing what is true in the public realm is going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to require friendship. I keep talking about friendship. The only reason I'm here today is because of friends. We couldn't put that journal out without each other. We worked together for a certain goal. So friendship is the effect of mutual commitment to the good. The work of friends will require coordination, cooperation, and the unity of the diversity of gifts and abilities that we have for pursuit of the good. And it's not just for our own self. The community of friends is going to have to seek the good for the polis. So a community of friends is seeking the good for the larger community. And this community is going to need to rebuild the institutions of culture, says me. I think everything is broken. I told one class this, everything is broken, and they said, no, it's not. I was like, I don't know, how's the family doing? How's education doing right now? How's the government doing? The business world? How's religion? Ooh. Do you want to rebuild these, or you want to just let them go and die? I don't want to let them die, because that's even worse. Dead is worse than broken. So I'm inviting people, come join me, let's rebuild. All right. So we have to know the nature of these institutions as well. Like, what's the nature and purpose of the family? What's the nature and purpose of religion? What's the nature and purpose of education? We've let that go in philosophy. Philosophy's job is to talk about institutions and what they're for. They're for the good. And we've kind of lost sight of that. All right, so do we want to have a lasting civilization? And what would that take? So I think these are super exciting questions. And I think we should be addressing them publicly in forums like this, maybe even regularly meeting together, like in the Public Philosophy Society that we started. And so I'm inviting you to come, let's reason together, and let's find answers, and let's rebuild things that are broken. We don't have to go, oh no, it's broken. And I don't know, we can't buy a new system of education, I don't think. We have to fix it. This is my home. Education's my home, so I take some responsibility to try to fix it. All right, so let me give you the conclusion to my talk. To sum up, philosophy is an area of study that is not merely relegated to the academy. It's not just what you do in the university classroom or some research place. It's an attitude which involves the love of wisdom. It's a method which includes the critical use of reason. It's an application to ourselves in self-examination. It is systematic and involves constructing a coherent philosophy of life that is based on what is real and what is true. And a philosophy of life based on what is true will determine what is good for ourselves and for the community. Public philosophy is philosophy done with the goal of the good life for the human community. Now, I'm going to pause, and you know what? I'm going to leave this on just in case. I don't know. People are watching. They might want to hear the discussion, question and answer period. I will turn this one off though. Okay, so that's my talk. And I'm wondering if you wrote down your questions. Do you have questions? Look how many people came out today to talk about philosophy. It's a lot of people. This room is full. This room is full. But now, okay, let's set a time. Let's say, we'll take questions for 20 minutes. If nobody has any questions, I'll be sad.
How are you doing Q&A?
Just say your question, I'll answer you.
I do.
Okay. Go, just go.
Where in our need can use exercise reasonable public disagreement fit in?
Disagreement is already there, right? It'll surface once we start talking to each other. And then we get to the heart of the disagreement. Like, why are we disagreeing right now? What is the source of the disagreement? The disagreement could be, it could be that we're disagreeing over how we know things, the method we're approaching answering questions with, or we disagree over metaphysics, which is probably where a lot of people disagree and they don't realize it. Oh, logic. Remember in logic, who has logic? Raise your hand. Logic has and I think ethics too. I have we're human. We're rational political animals. We have presuppositions, basic beliefs, and we disagree here. Either everything is eternal or only some things are eternal. This is the God or not God. That's the biggest division among humans. We have personality disagreements. I like reading books. Oh yeah, well I like gardening. We disagree over like our personality disposition. We have different backgrounds, which includes things like ethnicity, race, gender identity, socioeconomic background, where we're from in the world, geography, all of these differences, we fight over those things, right? We have uniqueness. Now, one class wanted to argue with me, maybe we're not unique. I think we're unique. And we fight about that too. I'm a special snowflake. I've got to be me and do my own thing, right? And we'll fight over that. I just want to sing. And then we have moods. And we might disagree because we're in a bad mood, right?
Well, that might play part of it. I was thinking more like.
Can you give me like an example?
Like, for example, I don't know your position, so I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yes.
I was reading, I don't remember who the author was, but they were critiquing physicalism.
Okay.
They believe that the body is the only thing in the mind, or there's no separation.
Okay.
Just substantial.
Uh-huh.
Whether your tone is different or serious music.
Okay.
Okay, is that splitting hairs, or is that just...
So no, that's metaphysics. Physicalism says all that exists is matter, and matter's probably forever. There's no soul, there's no God, there's no afterlife, there's no non-physical stuff. That's definitely no God. So that's metaphysics.
No, but the writer was referring to someone who was a believer in God and embraced physicalism.
Well, then that might be an area where we can say, maybe that's a less consistent view. Is this Peter Van Inwagen?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember that.
Okay. PVI. He's a very famous Christian physicalist. He thinks all that exists is matter, but he's a Christian. So you might go, okay, what are your reasons? Ask them, what are your reasons for holding that? And is that coherent? Or is that less coherent than pure physicalism, which is materialist, and pure, let's say, theism, which says there is a God, and God created the physical world, and God's not physical. So we can ask. You know, this is what I recommend. Ask honest questions to people. Be curious about why they believe that. Who was it? William Hasker. Close. He's close. So you can also, okay, so in philosophy, you can kind of do their pedigree. Like what is their flavor of philosophy? They're analytic philosophers, and the analytic school comes from positivism, which is definitely physicalist in nature. But some Christian philosophers adopted analytic philosophy, and they want to use the method because the method is very rigorous. But they maybe have inherited some of the assumptions because they think all that we know is through the senses. So what happens when a Christian adopts that view? All that we know is through the senses. God's not known through the senses. The physical world is. So you can kind of see how they might go that way. Yes, logical positivism is the granddaddy of analytic philosophy. I wrote about it in chapter 4.
I haven't read.
I know, he's reading my book, and I know, so I'm teasing him.
Would you equate natural religion?
Natural religion?
Natural law.
Not necessarily. Natural religion is like what David Hume does in his dialogues concerning natural religion, where he has these three characters, and they're discussing the nature of God from three different theistic perspectives, and they're sort of looking for meaning about the problem of evil and about miracles, and so they're talking about things of religion without any reference to scripture, just philosophically. Natural law, which I want to say is different than the moral law. The moral law could be something like philosophy exploring the good. Natural law is usually based on Thomas Aquinas and is sort of has religious roots. Actually, I'm going to plug this again. One of the essays written by Professor Joshi in this lovely journal is a critique of the new natural law. So there's something called, this is on page 78 if you have it. The new natural law is saying, hey, we're not going to do metaphysics like the old natural law people did. because, you know, we don't do metaphysics anymore, but they slip it in, they do metaphysics. So he's just pointing out it's not really different. So they assume God. They don't try to prove God. Did that answer your question? Good. Ernie?
Most of the discourse right now are lack of factor, in my opinion, based on experiential difference. How do you get to the root when you have different, not just value systems, but how they believe everything came to be in their world versus yours? And
so are you talking about background differences like I just described?
let's say background differences, mostly socioeconomical.
Okay.
Or you can even go to religion, but it's
Okay.
where, you know, your actual base of everything you've ever been taught is X. But this person's base is Y.
Okay.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
I
How
would
do you get to those truths?
I would say
Somebody that far away.
we might have to do a lot of work to say, okay, we're talking about our background differences, and that's up here, but why are you interpreting it that way? That might take us back down a little bit. Oh, your personality might be part of that, and oh, your beliefs about philosophy. And in philosophy, I draw the house in the philosophy class. The bottom layer is your approach to how we know stuff. My suspicion over many, many years of testing this out is that we don't have agreement on that. I know things through my personal experience. You know things through your personal experience, and they're different, so we can't communicate with each other. And I'm saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. We interpret our experiences through reason, and you have reason and I have reason. So let's try to start there. So going from background back to personality, back to here's the differences we have, to hey, here's reason what we have in common. Can we go to that to see if we can use that as a tool to talk about the first level differences in our assumptions about reality? Because I think all this background stuff is just becoming a power struggle. It's not making any progress, and I think it's because we need to back up and say, yes, we acknowledge we have different backgrounds, we have different privileges, and we have different everything, but we do have something similar. We're rational, and we need the community, and we have bodies. So let's come reason together. Does that help? In theory, right?
It's in theory.
But in practice, it takes wisdom. So. I mean, we do it at this public, at this Philosophy Friday thing, we don't all agree at that table. And we try to work, I try to work back. I think it's fun though, because you realize, wow, people really, I run it through my sort of house and I go, yep, there's a house here. And yep, we really do disagree. But you know what? We're doing this together and maybe we can make progress. It's hopeful.
Kind of thinking on the grand scale as far as, the different things that you say.
Yes.
I do agree with you.
I know the grand scale is kind of scary, but we have to do one public lecture at a time. And that's why I'm enlisting your help, because now you get to go talk to 2 people. Why don't you do this? Commit to talking to 2 people this week about what you learned here and see if we can spread it. Maybe it'll go viral. Public philosophy's gone viral. That'd be so awesome. It's never going to happen. Wait, I shouldn't be cynical in front of you. Lydia?
You suggest if somebody seems to want to discuss philosophy with you, and they talk to you and ask you your beliefs, and then they say, well, I disagree, and then they say, can't we just agree to disagree?
Step 1, never tell them your beliefs. Step 2, ask them about theirs. Master the art of Socrates. He never tells anybody what he believes. You're left believing he doesn't know anything at the end. He knows some stuff. He just doesn't go around telling people. But he does go to people who seem to have knowledge, and he asks them, what do you know? Because he wants to know. And he's like, hey, you're talking about this. It seems like you know about that. Tell me more. And then it turns out, So you can raise people's consciousness by asking them questions. People love to talk about themselves. Ask them questions about themselves. Then you can say, what is your quest? Why are you asking me this? Why do you want to know what I believe? Why does that matter? Because, okay, students do this to me all the time. They did it to me today in class. Dr. Burton, what do you believe? I make stuff up. Because you know what? Usually they do it because they want to put you in this box and then they want to bash the box. So don't let them put you in a box. Say, why are you interested? Now, if someone's like, they said you had the truth, and you say, they lie. No, I think people like to gossip, and they're curious about personal matters where it's not like a concern for truth. This has been my experience, because I'm kind of naive at first. I'm like, oh yeah, I think the good is blah, blah, blah. And then they go online, Burton's teaching kids the good is blah, blah, blah. She's harming the children. Like, okay, don't ever do that again. So yeah, why do you have to tell them? Now this is out there. And great. So, are you convinced? Did I give you a reason? Did I answer the questions? What is public philosophy? And why is it necessary? Why do we need it? I did, so you're morally obligated now to seek the good for yourself and for the community. All right. My work here is not done, but maybe, I don't know, if there are other questions, I'm willing to entertain it, but it's been a long day. I'm willing to say good job for persevering through an hour and 10 minutes of talking. All right, now I'm going to pause this. Thank you for the online listeners. I'm going to stop the video now. I'm going to end the meeting. Bye, Marilyn.